Hello, and welcome back to the Ninox Learning Channel. My name is Andy. I'm a Ninox programmer and trainer with Nioxis Corporation. I'm also a certified public accountant, and as a CPA and former tax auditor, I appreciate the importance of a strong and detailed audit trail. The ability to go back and see which users have done what and when inside the database is a crucial part of compliance, no matter what laws you're complying with. Whether it's HIPAA or Sarbanes-Oxley in the United States or the GDPR regulations in Europe. Anybody who is concerned with keeping track of who's accessing their data and ensuring that their data is secure and protected is going to want a good, strong, and detailed audit trail or user history. In this class today on the Learning Channel, we're going to see how to build a detailed audit trail that will enable us to add a higher level of security and protection to our database, our data schema, and most importantly, the contents of our databases. For those of you that would like to follow along, you can log into our website at www.nioxis.com. Log into our member portal and go under Templates and select Advanced Audit Trail and User History. You'll be able to download this example or sample accounting system that I'm using in the class today, and you can follow along, or even better, you can copy the code and paste it right into your database and be up and running with a deluxe and advanced, sophisticated audit trail and user history system very, very quickly. The database is unlocked and it's free to all Nioxis members to download anytime you like. So let's go ahead and get started. Now for this class, I'm going to be using the same database that we used in our previous training class for role-based security. And that is this very basic, simple sample accounting system. Now to appreciate the audit trail that we're going to learn how to build today, let me show you the importance of an audit trail to begin with. I'm going to go in and show you and demonstrate a classic, simple deception, a method of corporate theft that happens every day in businesses large and small across the world. We're going to go into our accounts receivable module, and I'm going to create an invoice. The invoice is going to have a number, it's going to have the amount that the customer paid, the date we received that payment, and finally, the status. I close the invoice, maybe we print it, we process it, whatever needs to be done. This transaction is now completed. And if we go back to our desktop and click on History, we can see that this user, Nioxis, that's me, on this date, today, at 1:19 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the United States, a receivables record was modified, record number 25, with invoice number 321456 and an invoice date of 3/15/2020. This is the history that we have today. Now let me show you how inadequate this history might be if someone has it in their mind to defraud a company. I can go back into the receivables module, go back into that invoice, and instead of 500, note that 400 was paid. The status still says paid. The customer who sent in the money, they know they made payment in full, $500. And we're showing the invoice is paid in full. So this isn't necessarily going to cause any serious red flags. We then go on into our bank deposits, and I prepare a bank deposit, noting that on this date, $400 was deposited. So we show receipt of $400, we show a bank deposit of $400. The problem is $500 actually was paid into our company. The extra $100, I could have taken that out of my pocket and nobody would have ever known. If we go look back at our desktop at the history, all we see is, once again, at 120, this user on this date modified this record. A minute ago, this was 119. So all it's done is updated this time to show me the exact date and time of the last modification made to this record. And then it's also telling me that about the same time, the same user on the same date processed a bank deposit. In this case, bank deposit slip number 11. But nowhere in here does it show me that the original amount of $500 got changed to $400. And if I'm a supervisor going in and I'm looking at my receivables, just looking at this record by itself is not necessarily going to remind me or give me any indication that something is wrong. Catching a single $100 mistake, or even a $25 or $50 mistake, amongst thousands of valid entries is very difficult to do. And this is what allows people to get away with massive fraudulent behaviors that deprive companies of millions of dollars of profit, because it's happening just a few dollars at a time right under our noses, but not quite on the radar. Now let me show you the value of an advanced audit trail. And when I'm done with this, I'm going to show you how to build this very audit trail and put it right into your database. I have a hidden table, which is only available to the administrator when I go into administrative mode, and it is my system settings table. I'm going to go into system settings and turn maintain audit trail on and close the administrative settings. That table is now gone. Let's have the same transaction or series of events repeated now with the audit trail. I go into receivables. I process an invoice with an invoice number, the amount received, the date received, and note that it's paid. I, or maybe someone that I'm working with, if you will, go back in a little bit later and simply change this to $400. It's still paid. Everything looks right. I go in and process the bank deposit and note that $400 was paid in full. We received $400. The invoice is now showing as paid in full, and we show all $400 going into the bank account. We look at the system history. Everything looks right. Now let's go see what this looks like on our advanced audit trail. I'm going to go back into the receivables module, and I'm going to pull up this invoice, the one for $500 that was written down to $400. There's a little invisible hotspot right here that I can click that brings up the audit trail. And look at what I see. The invoice was entered, and the amount was changed from $0 to $500. The status was changed to paid. Then somebody came back a little bit later and changed the amount from $500 down to $400. And at that same time, on the same date, a $400 bank deposit ticket was processed. I know that at this time, when this was first entered, this was a $500 invoice. It then was written down from $500 to $400 on this date at this time by this user. At one point, I see that this was a $500 cash receipt, but I only see $400 going into the bank. I can very quickly see something doesn't appear to be right. And I know who to go to talk to find out why an invoice that was originally recorded with a $500 payment is now only showing a $400 payment, with the status still showing paid in full. This is the value of an advanced audit trail. How did we do it? Very simple. First, I went into my administrative mode, options, and I created a global function. And I'm going to go through this a little quickly and then come back very slowly and explain to you how to make this work in your database. I created a global function, and these 16 lines of code allow me to keep track of anything that happens by any user in any table or field in my database. Think of this as a technological video camera that's recording the activities. Then I went into the table and I set up a couple of digital cameras, a couple of Ninox security cameras, if you will, to keep track of what's happening. The first camera was set up as a trigger on create. This function calls the global function that I just showed you and records the name of the table, the activity, the record number, and if you take this concatenated string and read it together, it says that we created the new record with this number in the customer invoice table. And that's what this is referring to here, customer invoices. I then set up a few extra cameras. I went into the amount paid or the customer payment received field, and I set up another trigger. This time, I set up a variable to capture the original amount. This was the $500. And I then set up a second variable to capture the new amount that was entered in the field. That was $400. So we now know that the original invoice amount was $500, and now the invoice is showing $400. And again, I put out a call to that global formula audit trail, and I passed the following parameters. This table had this transaction, this event take place. The invoice payment amount received for this invoice, this is the ID, the record number for this record in my invoices table. The amount received was changed on this invoice number from the original amount to the amount showing in customer payment received. Or, to read it specifically, invoice payment amount received on invoice number 954678, the amount was changed on this invoice from $500 to $400. And let's look at one other little secret camera that I put in place, and that is here on the invoice status. Again, in the trigger after update, I make a call to the audit trail global function and say that this field, invoice status, this record in this table, customer invoices, this event took place. We change the invoice status to, and we show the new status. These triggers, or cameras, if you will, that I have put in very specific places in a table trigger and in two field triggers, allow me to populate this other hidden table, which is the audit trail itself. So remember that first trigger that said an invoice has been entered? That's right here. This individual on this date at this time entered this invoice. It happened to be record number 26 in the customer invoices table. Subsequent to that, the same user on the same invoice changed the amount from the previous amount, which was 0, changed it to 500. After that, they went and noted that the status was changed to paid. The next record tells me that someone then came back later on and changed the amount of the invoice from its original value of 500 down to its new and current value of 400. And then finally, a bank deposit ticket was created at this time, on this date, by this user for that amount of money. This detailed audit trail was captured by all of those cameras that I set up, that global function that I kept calling over and over and over again. This advanced audit trail is going to give me a much more effective and efficient way to make sure that the only people that are using the system are the people that should be, and the only features and functions they're accessing, the only things they are doing, are the things they should be doing. And maybe we need to revisit the idea that the person who creates an invoice has the opportunity to go back and edit the value of the invoice. Or maybe it was a different person, and the person who entered the invoice didn't even know the amount got changed. But with our detailed audit trail telling us who did what, where, and when, we're going to be able to find these situations and hopefully take care of them quickly. How does this work? And how can you build this right into your database? Well, it all starts with the global function. Global functions, as you know, are accessed in administrative mode through the Options tab in this field right here, Global Script Definitions. I created a global function that I named Audit Trail, paying particular attention to the capital T, and when you call a global function, the call name is case sensitive. And when I call this function, I pass a couple of parameters. A text parameter equal to the name of the table. And then another text parameter equal to the name of the field. And finally, a numeric parameter showing me the numeric ID, the unique Ninox assigned record ID of the record in question. And then finally, the last parameter, a text field where I detail the activity of what was done. What I then do is I go in, I create a new record in my audit trail table, that hidden invisible table that nobody but the system administrator knows is there. I stamp the date, the exact time, the name of the user, and the role of the user for whatever event I'm now recording. I take this parameter, table name, and put it into the table field in this newly created audit trail record. I then take the field name parameter and I plug that into the field of the newly created audit trail record. I note the record ID of the record that contains this field in this table. And finally, I record the text string, this last parameter here that details the activity. What happened? What did this user do in this table, in this field, on this date, and at this time? This global function called Audit Trail, download the template from nioxis.com and simply select the whole thing and copy it. Paste it right into your global script definitions in the Options tab of your database. Any Ninox database, you just need to be in administrative mode. You have to have the red wrench. Once you have created this global function, then you can decide from where you're going to call it. What do I mean by a call? Well, we placed one call at the table level, here at the trigger on create. Whenever a new record is created, I call the audit trail function. And let's look at the parameters that I passed. Remember, there are 4 parameters. The first one is the name of the table. This is a text value, so it's enclosed in double quotes. And I call this table customer invoices. Then I would pass the name of the field. But this is not a field level trigger. This is not a field level security camera. This is a table level security camera. So I simply pass a null text value, 2 double quotes. Since this is at the table level and not the record level, I simply pass a 0. There's no particular record yet. And then I pass the 4th and final parameter, which is a concatenated text string consisting of 3 segments. The hard-coded text, created new record, the Ninox function this, which refers to the ID number assigned to this new record, And the third segment, another hard-coded piece of text in the customer invoice table. Created new record 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the customer invoice table. This is the audit trail record that is entered into that hidden invisible audit trail table every time a new record gets created. This is what we call a table level trigger. This is a video camera. We're calling these little security cameras that's watching what happens at the table level. Now let's go into the table, into a specific record, and find those other two cameras. We placed a camera on the invoice status field. Again, a trigger after update. Every time the invoice status field is changed, we once again call the global function audit trail. We pass the name of the table as the first parameter. That's a text value, so it's enclosed in double quotes. The second parameter, now that we are at the record level and we do know a specific field, we pass the name of that field, the invoice status field. Again, it is a text parameter, therefore we enclose it in double quotes. We want to note the specific record where this field in this table existed. That's this number right here. And please note, since this is a numeric parameter, I specified that the ID number be passed as a number, a numeric value. And then finally, the fourth parameter, the hard-coded text, changed invoice status to with a trailing space, and the value of the invoice status text field. 4 parameters, each separated by a comma, passed to this global function, which will take these 4 parameters and turn them into an entry in our audit trail hidden table. And then there was another camera that we put a little twist on. Not only did we put a camera on the customer payment amount received, but we also used a phantom field. Now, those of you that have attended my classes or any of our live webinars or training seminars at Ninox University, especially our Thursday Ninox Learning Lab, you've heard me talk about phantom fields. You've heard me talk about fields that I use over and over again that we use here at Nioxis that never appear on screen. These phantom fields exist behind the scenes, just out of view, and they serve a very important function for us. They allow us to keep track of activities that we need to keep track of without the user being slowed down, without the user having to do anything. In fact, the user probably doesn't even know that these functions are happening behind the scenes. That's kind of the purpose of a security system. Keep it hidden, out of view, out of the way, and monitor the behavior and activity of our users inside the system. We create a variable called original amount. That is the amount, the original invoice amount field right there. We then create a second variable called amount. That is the customer payment received. Now, hold on a second. We have 2 different invoice amount fields. Let me show you that in a little more detail and explain why. We have the customer payment received amount field. This is a numeric field formatted in US dollars that we can see on screen. But if we go in as the administrator to the schema, we see there is a second numeric field. It is hidden from view. We have nulled out the display option. This is a second numeric field, and look how this field gets its value. Anytime there is a change, anytime there is an update to the customer payment received, the payment amount receipt field that we can see, anytime that field changes, the original amount is recorded in this variable. That is the hidden field. This is giving us a record of what the amount was before the change was made. Then we record the amount after the change was made, and then we record both of those amounts here. It was changed from the original amount to the amount that is now showing in the field on the screen. Now we can do more than simply go into the history and see that this record was edited. We can see which field was edited, and we can see the nature of the edit. It was changed from the original amount to the amount that we now see. Using a hidden phantom field, which will be an exact duplicate of the field you see on screen, allows you to capture the value of the original amount or the original content of the field on screen before it is changed. So now you have that before and after reporting capability. And again, if you are a little confused, download the template and simply copy all 4 lines of this code block, replacing the field values, original invoice amount and customer payment received. The original invoice amount is the hidden amount field. The customer payment amount, that's the one that appears on screen. Simply swap out these field names for the names of the field in your database, and you'll be able to clearly see how the audit trail is updated when we place the call and send this 4th value, this concatenated text string, providing great detail on the exact edit that was made in this field at this time on this date by this user. Let's go in and add these same cameras, this same level of security to the payables function so you can see how easy it is to do. And I'm going to use a copy and paste mechanism that is identical to the mechanism you will use to set up this advanced audit trail system in your database. First, and probably most importantly, create a table called Audit Trail. And make sure that table has these fields: date, time, username, user role. These are both text. 2 more text fields for the name of the table and the name of the field where the activity took place. Finally, a numeric field to track the ID of the record where the activity took place. And then a text field, and I use a multi-line text field so I can put in a lot of detail if I want to. But a multi-line text field or a plain text field where you can record the details of the activity itself. And finally, hide the table. It's important that the audit trail table be invisible and that its existence be unknown. So someone who is attempting maybe to facilitate some inappropriate behavior inside your database, we don't want them to know the audit trail table exists, because they simply could then go to the table and erase their tracks, erase the evidence of what they've done. Now that we've created the table and hidden the audit trail table, let's do the following. For your database, the database you're using on your desktop, you'll go into Options, Global Script Definitions of the accounting system database, the template that you've downloaded from nioxis.com. You will copy these 16 lines of code by selecting them, right-clicking, and selecting Copy. Then go to your database, go into administrative mode by clicking the wrench in the top right-hand corner, selecting Options, going to Global Script Definitions, opening that field up, right-clicking and pasting the 16 lines of code that you just copied out of the template database that you downloaded from the member portal at nioxis.com. Now that you've set up your global function, now we can set up the individual little cameras that are going to monitor behavior throughout the database. We've already seen how it works in the receivables function. Let's set it up in the payables function. First, we want a table level camera. Therefore, we will go to Edit Fields, the data schema or the data model for the table itself, go into Trigger on Create, and place a call to the global function. Instead of typing the code, just copy it out of the template. Go to the receivables table, open up a record, go to the invoice status field, the trigger after update, and copy the one single line of code. Let's go to the table in your database where you want to place this table level security camera. Go under the gear in administrative mode to edit fields. Pick the field that you want to edit. We can do it here, the vendor invoice status field, or we could have just opened up a record and selected the field and clicked on the wrench. However you do it, go to the trigger after update for this field. Open the field, right click, and paste that single line of code that you copied. Now we have to make a few changes. This is not the customer invoice table. This is the vendor invoices payable table. And this is the invoice status, but it is the vendor invoice status. The number ID parameter, the numeric value of the unique record in this table, we don't need to change that. This is hard-coded text, enclosed in double quotation marks. No need to change that. We just need to change the one field that is actually where we're putting the camera, and that field in this table is called vendor invoice status. That's all we need to do. Let's test it and see how it works. I'll save my changes, exit administrative mode, and create a new invoice. I'll give it an invoice number and a date, noting the invoice amount and that this is an open invoice. We have not distributed or dispersed payment at this time. An administrator can enter administrative mode, pull up the hidden audit trail table, and we can see, if we look for it, right here on line 13, the vendor invoices table, the status field in this table was changed to a status of open. We know the table, we know the field. Which record are we talking about? Record number 3. This record, this field in this record in this table was changed by this user operating with these rights at this time on this date to open. If I were to go back to the exact same record and I were to change the status to canceled and go look at my audit trail, I would now see that the status was changed from open to canceled. Let's put in the other camera that allows us to keep track not only of the amount of the invoice here in this field, but allows us to track any changes from an original amount to a new amount. What's the first step? First, create your phantom field. Add a field. This will be a numeric field, and we will call this original vendor invoice amount. Notice that when I have a field that appears on screen, I name it using all caps. Phantom or hidden fields that work behind the scenes, I name those using upper and lower case. It's an easy way for me to keep track of what's visible on screen and what's not just by looking at the name. I'm going to go ahead and hide this field by going to display field only and typing null, never. This field will never under any circumstance be visible on the form to the end user. Go back to receivables, open up a record, go to the customer payment received field. The trigger after update contains these 4 lines of code. Select all 4, right-click, and copy. Cancel out of that screen, and now go to the table in your database where you want to place this next little security camera. Open up the table, open up the record, go into the field, vendor invoice amount. Go to the trigger after update. Trigger after update is where we always place our advanced audit trail cameras, these little tracking devices that allow us to keep track of who's doing what. Right click and paste the 4 lines of code that you copied from the database that you downloaded, the template database that you downloaded from nioxis.com. And now we need to do a little updating. There's no field called original invoice amount, but there is a field called original vendor invoice amount. So we're going to make that change. Next, the field in the receivable screen was the customer payment received. We need to replace that with the vendor invoice amount. Finally, the original invoice amount is also going to be replaced with its corresponding field in your database or in this sample database, which is again the vendor invoice amount. And now we make the call to the global function. We need to update our parameters. This is not customer invoices. This is vendor invoices payable. This is not the invoice payment amount received. This is the invoice amount total due. The number of the ID of the record remains the same. This is hard-coded text, but let's update it to say, instead of changed amount of invoice, changed amount of vendor invoice, and instead of customer invoice number, it is the vendor invoice number. And we changed it from the original amount, which is the variable defined in line 1, to the current amount, which is the amount stored in the field vendor invoice amount. Now, let us go in, save our changes, exit administrative mode, but first, I'm going to go into my audit trail, and just to make it easy to read, I'm going to delete all the records that are there, so it'll be easy for us to see the next record that gets created. Now I will exit administrative mode. I will go to my payables table and change the vendor invoice amount from 1,000 to 1,200, and note that it's been canceled. Now I go in and I can see in my hidden audit trail table a couple of records here. First, that the invoice amount total due for this invoice was changed from 0 to 1,200. Then the status was changed from what it was to paid. Remember, we didn't put a previous field value, phantom field, on the status field. So we can just see that it was changed invoice status to paid, and then immediately changed it to canceled. That's all we need to do. It may sound complex. It's really very simple. And the whole thing can be done without you having to write a single line of code. To put the advanced audit trail system into your database, download the template. It's free for all members at nioxis.com. Paste the global function, and then start placing your video cameras in every table and in every field where you want to keep very close, detailed track of who is doing what and when they're doing it. This hidden audit trail table will become a very valuable and powerful tool in your efforts to secure your database and to protect your content. And that's it for today's learning class. Today we talked about a global function. In our next learning class, we're going to learn how to build global functions from the very simple to the very complex. We're going to talk about how to pass parameters back and forth and how to use global functions to create far more efficient and powerful Ninox databases. Until then, experiment with the Audit Trail database, put it into your Ninox databases, and experiment with how you can enhance the protection and security function that everyone should have around the crucial data that they store in Ninox. Thank you so much for joining me in today's class. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll go in as a member and log in and download today's Advanced Audit Trail template. It's unlocked. You can copy and paste the code right into your database. Have fun, and please come back and join us next week on the Ninox Learning Channel by Nioxis, when we're going to take a deep dive into creating and building and calling global functions. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you soon in the classroom. Bye-bye.